Shana Tova. The other week, I sent a text message to my husband. It said, "I'm letting go of rushing." I was in a line of cars awaiting my first COVID test. I had wanted a rapid COVID test, but was sent to another location to get a less prompt, more accurate PCR test. But I wanted to know the results now, so that if they were negative, I could move on as soon as possible to the many things that I needed to do that had been so suddenly interrupted. But something bigger was at play. I had a possible exposure. I had to get tested. A PCR test was best, and that was all there was to it. Letting go of rushing. Letting go of what I thought my week would be. After already letting go all week because of this and that, because life does that with puppies and children and homes and jobs and bodies and souls. After a year and a half and still going of letting goes with this pandemic, with the wildfires, and so much more. I watched myself resist letting go as I realized in that moment that there was nothing else I could do. This idea of letting go as a good, wise, and spiritual thing is not new. I admit I loved the hit song Let It Go from the first Frozen movie that I watched like 100 times with my daughter. It so resonated with me then, and even more today. And of course, for those of us who have explored or practiced meditation, we practice and practice letting go of that thought, and that one, and that one. And while I love that song, and while I have explored meditation, while not the most practiced yet, I've never known such an extended period of so much letting go, with the little and the big things, day in, day out, week in, month in, year out. I'm weary from letting go. I'm grieving. And yet, as I sat in that line of cars for my test, not daring to really take in what if I tested positive, letting go was exactly what I needed to do to begin to face and find peace with what was happening that was beyond my control. And in that moment, my daughter had some great music playing on the car stereo, and my loving husband was on the other side of that text message supporting me. My COVID test was gratefully negative. But since then, as I have sat with what happened that day while navigating being in the thick of the river of ongoing letting goes that is our new reality, as I have been preparing for the High Holy Days, immersing myself in the themes and the work of this season, I am seeing how embedded the idea of release is in so many of our rituals of these holiest of days. Somehow, the wise ones of old knew that we would need reminders as we ended a year and started another. We would need help letting go of the past year, to step into a new one, whole and clear and free and at peace. And so they populated our journey with reminders. On the second day of Rosh Hashanah, we will read of the near sacrifice of Isaac by his father Abraham. Isaac was to be the inheritor of the legacy of Judaism through Abraham, and yet God asked Abraham to let go of this promise, to in fact destroy it through the deeds of his own hands, to sacrifice it. This troubling moment of near child sacrifice, followed by God's preventing it, that is lifted up by our tradition at the head of our year, can be a teaching for us to let go of what we think our lives will be. In fact, actually put an end to those expectations and then let go of even that as a ram appears in the thicket, as a voice calls out to us to shift. There is something more that we did not or could not imagine as we let go. I imagine Abraham shaken, tossed, and upended from the back and forth. With all we have been living through, in addition to the normal things we live through, beyond the wildfires and the pandemic, have we not all been shaken, tossed, and upended from the back and forth of what is or what will be, what we thought we knew and now no longer know, all of which is changing constantly? This Torah reading can say to all of us, I see you. You were going in one direction, and then you were rerouted, and then you were rerouted again. But pay attention, listen, see, be open to the yet to be revealed. The mystical Torah commentary, the Sfat Emet, written by Rabbi Lieb of Ger, teaches that letting go is actually an essential step for us to connect to a greater sense of peace and connection. The text says, in order to perceive the divine will, one must release all of one's attachments and egoistic desires. Only then can the divine will be revealed to a person. And the deepest truth is that we must listen in order to receive that which is beyond our comprehension, namely, knowledge of God's infinite nature. To this end, we must continually surrender our conceptual knowledge, that which we understand with our minds alone. We don't know what will come tomorrow, but can we release enough so that we are receptive to the revelations that might then be possible, so that we might hear a voice calling us by name, offering us a ram, the answer, the affirmation of life, of legacy, of continuation of hope. Tonight begins the Shemitah year, a biblically ordained Sabbath year for the land that happens every 7 years, a Shabbat of years. The Torah says, 6 years you may sow your field, and 6 years you may prune your vineyard and gather in the field. But in the 7th year, the land shall have a Shabbat of complete rest, a Shabbat Shabbaton. The Torah goes on to say, every 7th year you shall practice release of debts. The Torah continues that if we observe the Shemitah year, then the land shall yield its fruit, and you shall eat your fill, and you shall live upon it in security. Let the earth rest, a complete rest. Release our hold on things owed to us. Let go, and it will be good for us. Rabbi Abraham Isaac Cook, the chief rabbi of Jerusalem in the early 1900s, wrote an extensive legal text on the observance of Shemitah in response to the many Jewish immigrants returning to the land and reestablishing agriculture. For him, Shemitah was more than something Jews needed to do for the land. Jews needed to do it for their souls. He said, it can restore a pristine freshness to our lives, not only through what is already present, albeit hidden in our souls, but also through what is being prepared to reveal itself and illuminate us by the power of our free choice to do what is good. When we let go, we can be in beginner's mind, fresh and open to receive what is not yet known, not yet seen. My colleague, Rabbi Fred Sherlander-Daub, teaches that Shemitah is a concept of radical release. We are entering a year of intentional, radical release. What is it we need or want to release in our lives? And what is it we don't want to release, but the world is saying we must? What are our feelings around these releasings? What do we need to grieve? What will be good for us if we can really let go? On Rosh Hashanah, our ancients gave us tashlich, the embodied annual ritual of walking to the water's edge, casting away our missteps, neglects, carelessness, unhelpful thoughts, judgments, injuries to self, others, the earth, the divine, to cast away our rushing. our attachments to outcomes and expectations. We are given permission to let it all go as we step into a new year. We watch the bread float down the river, carried away to the ocean, the great sea of holding that which is so much bigger than us. In 10 days, on the eve of Yom Kippur, we will hear the haunting melody of Kol Nidre. All vows and promises and oaths and commitments that we made from the previous Yom Kippur until this Yom Kippur, we renounce them. All of them are undone, abandoned, canceled, null and void, none in force, and not in effect. Our vows are no longer vows. Our promises are no longer promises. Our oaths are no longer oaths. Some historians believe that this declaration was written in the 15th century Spain, when Jews were forced to convert to Christianity or be put to death. And many of these Jews remained Jews in secret. And when they came to Erev Yom Kippur, they were given the opportunity to be released from their forced vows to Christianity. While we may not be needing to release from such vows, every Kol Nidre says the new year is about release. We have had intentions, expectations, plans, our vows and promises, oaths and commitments. And as we make our way to Yom Kippur on this High Holy Day journey, we give space to honor what we had imagined and hoped, to grieve what could not be, to understand the things we no longer need, and to step into release. And this year being a Shemitah year, to step into radical release. These times, our lives, and the Yamim Noraim all ask us to let go of many things, but not all things. Throughout the month of Elul, the final month leading up to this new year, it's traditional for us to sing Psalm 27. Achat sha'alti me'etz Adonai ota avakesh, shivti bevetz Adonai kol yemei chayai. One thing I ask of the divine is to sit in the house of Adonai all the days of my life. One of my colleagues, Rabbi Nancy Fuchs Kramer, suggests that Psalm 27 means that there is one thing that we do not have to release, nor should we release, the idea of God and being in the midst of God. And I know that God means different things for each of us. Perhaps for some it is oneness or love, justice, majesty, magic, safety, alignment, presence, or peace. Whatever our idea of God may be, the Yamim Noraim journey is ultimately about returning to this idea, out there, in here, all around us, inside each of us. Return to this. Hold on to this, because this is the sea. This is the voice calling us, saving us and our children. This is the greater cosmic good. Seek it, find it, hold on to it as you let go into it, dwell in it. We don't ever have to let go of it, and we don't have to let go of seeking it at every moment. Leonard Cohen speaks of this very idea. Not knowing where to go, I go to you. Not knowing where to turn, I turn to you. Not knowing how to speak, I speak to you. Not knowing what to hold, I bind myself to you. Having lost my way, I make my way to you. I am a tea drinker, but every once in a while I like to have a cup of coffee. And I'm very particular about my coffee. It has to be just so, and that means adding just a little bit of half and half. But last week, when I decided that it was a moment for coffee, I made my coffee and went to the fridge to get out the half and half, but there was none. Such a little thing, right? But it was such a disappointment. My mouth was so set on that outcome. So unwilling to let go of the idea of coffee, I went to the freezer where we had some vanilla ice cream, and I put that in my coffee instead. And as I sat at breakfast with my daughter Rachel, I shared with her what had happened, and ended by saying, "I'm still so upset about not having half and half." She looked at me and said, "But Mom, you have ice cream." How right and deeply wise she was. Such a teacher of the spiritual work before us. I hadn't realized how amazing the ice cream was. And Rachel was like, "Let me turn your gaze, Mom. There is the ram. There is what you couldn't imagine." Abraham had to be called by name not once but twice to stop on the mountain of sacrifice, because it's hard to stop and shift. It's hard to let go of the half and half, the sacrifice, the plan, the expectation, the rush. Even when there might be salvation if we do, or at least ice cream. Or what the 16th century French writer Francois Rabelais may have meant when speaking of the great perhaps. We don't know so very much, and this not knowing is often so very uncomfortable. But the Yamim Noraim say to us, let it go. And this special Shemitah year says, try to let go even more. We did not, or could not, or would not dare imagine another High Holy Days on Zoom. But here we are. Something bigger is at play. And we are still a community. And we are still B'nai Yisrael, the Jewish people, held by an ancient tradition that says, I hear you, I see you, you are not alone. And we are still singing our vision to dwell in the house of all that is possible and good. And there is still ice cream, and beautiful souls, and kind deeds, and wise children, and bouncing puppies, radiant sunflowers, and sweet honey made by the bees. All of these are sparks of joy, delight, and awe, all part of the mysterious and expansive divine magic that we can hold on to, and which will in turn hold us and hold our dear world. May it be so. Ken Yehi Ratzon, Shana Tova U'Mituka. May it be a sweet and good year for all.